Hey everyone, this is Dave Parker from Breaking Audio. Today we're going to talk about recycling drum loops, a variety of things you can do with them. If you like tips on production and Pro Tools and Ableton, subscribe to our channel and you won't miss a video. All right, let's get going. So this is going to end up being a multi-part video. Maybe it'll be 3 different videos, make a little series out of this. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to cover everything I can think of in order to recycle a drum loop or what to do with the drum loop, which just uses for it. I like collecting a lot of this stuff. I've collected a bunch of it over the years, a bunch of different things. Found a variety of different uses for them. It's just something I like to play with a lot. So let's let's start with maybe the first. We'll start from like the simplest and go all the way to the most complex. Later on we'll really get into kind of like beat mangling and stuff like that, some like fun things. But we'll start with some really simple, like kind of obvious stuff first. So one thing that I've run into recently when working with someone was they had a beat with them. They brought me a beat and they were recording vocals to it. But when it got to the bridge of the song, it was a really mellow beat. It needed to pick up and it didn't. And it just kind of stayed the exact same, energy level the whole time. There was nothing in the beat to really make it pick up. I didn't create the beat. I don't know where it came from. But immediately what I thought of is like, hey, you know what? Let me pop open the loop library. All I think we really need is some sort of just like little shaker sound or something like that to like spice it up. Found something immediately, threw it in. So another thing you can do with drum loops is like to spice up existing stuff, even if it's in a subtle way. Something as simple as like just an extra auxiliary percussion element can add the lift that you need. So let's take the beat we have now and we're gonna find something for this, like something in the realm of like shakers or whatever it is. I'm gonna go to our tempo range, so I have my stuff organized by tempos. Let's just start clicking on some things. Nah. That's kind of cool. It fades out, which is weird. That's a bit too straight. All right, that'll work for now. That's got some energy. We'll throw that one in. One of the things we should probably do here, just for the sake of doing it, is I'm going to quantize the original loop. Control A, or Command A rather, and then Command U. Just going to give it a real quick quantize. Same thing with the maracas that we just imported here. So just to glue them together real quick, and let's see what we kind of get. Turn them down a bit. That helps. And that's pretty much what I did in this track. I just found like the right shaker thing, threw it in. That's all we needed. 2 seconds, we're done. So spicing things up, and that's something that I would use real straightforward, like something like a shaker, because it's not like some super unique like loop that like came from somewhere special, I'm sure. It's just a shaker, and it just saves me from having to go to the vocal booth and set up a shaker and set up a mic and record a shaker and get everything right. Because sometimes that stuff is not as easy as it sounds. Real quick fix stuff. All right, another simple way to use some of these loops are to take one, we'll use the loop that we found here, and add another one to it, and cut certain frequencies out of each of them. So for example, maybe on one, we cut the low end out, on the other, we cut the high end out, glue them together, and we have a somewhat unique sounding loop, right? So let's go ahead and give that a shot. So here's our existing beat. Okay. Go here and grab this guy. It's pretty interesting sounding right here. All right, so together we got Flam City, we got kicks and snares landing all over the place and all sorts of stuff. So what we're gonna do is, again, we're going to quantize this. As soon as it decides to behave. There we go. Command A, Command U. At least they're tighter. We still got some kicks and snares all over the place. It's generally not a good idea to have like 2 kicks at once. So what we're going to try to do here is we're going to go grab an auto filter. You could use an EQ for this as well. I want to cut out the low end of this beat. I'm going to go to this guy, and I'm going to do the opposite. Oopsie, I'm going to cut out the high end of this beat. So now we'll have is the low end from this guy, the high end from this guy. That's kind of interesting. I like it. There's some interesting stuff happening in the mid-range where like the thinned out kick drum is kind of making like a, it's kind of making like a, some little accented sort of funny little pattern. Right there. Right there. Yeah, it's interesting. So you can kind of come up with some pretty cool stuff. And you can take that idea pretty far. If we left our maracas in there, maybe we could have, you know, made some space in the high end for something. Just start layering them together piece by piece and seeing how they blend, having these two different beats. Both of these, the snares seem to line up pretty nice. So you have no weird issues there. So that's another really simple, straightforward idea. Let's move on to the next. So another super typical thing you could do with a drum beat would be to, like, really simple, just go ahead and hack it up and reorder the pieces, right? So what I've done here, so you look at this example, I've got a drum loop, this one right here. All right, it's got some like tom hits in place of a snare drum for whatever reason. It's kind of interesting. But maybe I'm like, I like the sound of this, but I don't necessarily like the pattern, right? Like the kick hits aren't matching what I'm doing musically and whatever it is I'm creating. So a good, or even the snare hits or whatever, but in this case, for me, it would be, you know what, let's reorganize the kick hits here. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've hacked this thing up like this, right? Well, first of all, I quantized the audio because if I'm going to be hacking up like this to the grid, I want to know that things are in the right place. So I kind of zoomed in and I just started putting little chops here and there where all the different little pieces are. That's a hi-hat right there. That's a hi-hat right there. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, da-da-da-da. That one's a little off. You want to zoom in and touch that up. But so that's pretty much what I did. Hacked it up into little pieces. And then I ended up with this. I reordered it. Kick, hat. Instead of kick, kick, snare thing, it was kick, hat, snare thing, some extra kicks. I actually used 2 tracks. So I'd have the kicks on top of some hats to make it sound a little bit smooth. Because what happens a lot of times when you're chopping this stuff up, you're gonna end up with things that don't necessarily sound so smooth because they're hacked the way they are. So in this case, I wanna keep the hats going on top of the kick drum. So it made it sound a bit smoother. So let's see what we got here. Let's hear the difference. Listen to the kick drums. Right? So I just changed the kick drum pattern. That sounds actually really smooth for what it is. That's something I do a lot. Recently I've been working with putting breakbeat style, like the really like up-tempo kind of over a real drummer. So the real drummer's drums I quantized to the grid, and the breakbeat stuff, I really kind of had to go through and like edit them just like this, because not all the, you know, the kick hits and the snare hits aren't lining up. Of course, with a breakbeat, you're gonna have a whole bunch of stuff like real fast, you know, all over the place. But some of the kicks were just driving you nuts because things aren't really lining up. So I had to kind of go through and resort the beat a little bit, just like I did here, you know, to get it to gel with the real drums. And you know, it's a super straightforward technique, but it's like, you know, it's one of the best. It's like one of the most reliable. So when I was done, I had something that sounded like, oh, these two parts were just meant for each other. You know, they just absolutely glued. You know, best way to do it, like no plugins involved, none of that kind of stuff. Just hack, reorganize, focus on where the hits are, kicks and snares, that kind of stuff, and you'll come up with something cool. Another thing you can do, which is super typical, taking a drum loop, like I said earlier, you might find that you like the particular sound of like a kick, snare, hat or something like that, but you don't like the pattern at all. So another thing you could do, instead of just chopping it up, you could take the samples from the beat itself, just cut the kick, cut the snare, cut the hat out, and actually give it, you know, some new, you know, a totally new pattern, you know, by using it in a drum rack and triggering it with MIDI, and somebody could even play something or whatever. You can get pretty fancy with it at that point, once you have something sliced into, you know, in a way that you can use MIDI to chop it up. So let's jump in here and have a look at what we can do with this thing. The best way to deal with this is to throw this right on in the arrange view here, so we can really have a look. And with the other thing we're gonna need here is we need a MIDI track. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a MIDI track, like so. And we're gonna need a drum rack. Throw a drum rack on this dealie. And we're gonna go in, before we do anything, I'm gonna do the good old quantize to keep this easy. Control it, Command A, Command U. And then we're just gonna slice. We got, this is a kick drum right here. So kick, snap, kick, hat, snare, right in a row. Really easy. Just gonna hack these right up. I'm gonna toss them into our drum rack. So we're gonna put the kick where the kick drum goes. Put the hat where the hat goes. And the snare where the snare goes. And now, I'm gonna give this a little bit of volume help. The samplers tend to, as you can see here, it decreases the volume automatically by -12 dB, which is good. I can go ahead and turn them all up, but I'm just gonna go ahead and throw a drum bus on it to make life simple. There we go. I'll add some boom too, why not? A little bit of compression. Great, so now I have a playable, not that I can finger drum or anything, but I have a playable selection of sounds right from this thing right here. You know, and that can be used, we can throw some other MIDI patterns in there and you know, completely change the pattern. And then, I mean, really, I mean, once you have it in a drum rack and you have it in a sampler like this, I mean, you can put like whatever you want on it. You can enhance it. I mean, this, obviously, when I listen to this, I hear that this would probably need some EQ. Might want to throw an EQ8 in there. I could take it from there, really. Flavor to taste, I guess, really. So let's explore putting, you know, let's get some MIDI, you know, happening on this. All right, so let's go back to our loop library here. And what we're gonna do, so we're gonna look for this. Let's grab this guy. All right, so Ableton makes extracting MIDI from a drum part pretty easy. A lot of times it does require a little bit of cleanup. You might wanna, you know, it struggles a bit occasionally. Let's just have a listen to this real quick. All right, so that's all the loop we're really gonna need. I'm gonna real quick run down here and I'm gonna quantize it as well, just for ease of use, and hack all this out of here. I've trimmed it down to just the loop of it I want. All right, so super simple. We're gonna right click, and then we're gonna go down to convert drums to new MIDI track. And we're gonna have a listen to our MIDI track. Yep, so there is a drum hit in there that we don't want. There's a snare right there in the middle of it. So, example of a mistrigger, it can happen sometimes. It usually happens with, you know, snares and hats. All right, well now we got a pretty good loop there, and we're gonna go chuck it onto this track. This is where we put our samples before that were taken from this loop. So we have samples from here. And now we have the pattern from this. All right, and we end up with this. All right, so it needs a little bit of sweetening. As I said, I would probably like EQ this thing. The hat's a little bit heavy. I would perhaps take out some of the low mid. I'll just slap the filter on it real quick, but yeah, right, not too bad. I put some reverb on that and, you know, sweeten it up, you know, compress it, you know, play with the drum bus a little bit, really slam it through it good, get it hitting heavy, and that's cool, and it's unique. And then the whole idea is, I mean, it's in MIDI now, so, you know, if I want to take this pattern and make it even more interesting, you know, that'd be, you know, like I just could do whatever to it, you know. And the other thing, by the way, I cut these out, this kick snare hat thing, pretty simply. I mean, you can get kind of fancy with this stuff. I mean, if you wanted to, here's some good tips, right? I've got the whole drum rack down here. I've got all this empty space. I could do something where I take the kick a second time, throw it in, maybe pitch that one down a little bit. That could be good for like a good old boom, boom, you know, that kind of thing. One's a little bit lower, one's a little quieter, whatever. Maybe I could EQ them a little differently so I get some like different flavors. Because sometimes when you're chopping things up like this, as you heard with the hats, they can be a little bit like fake and like it's exactly the same every time. So trying to come up with different ways of having variation is a really good idea. So let's say down here on G1, I put another hi-hat, but I'm just gonna tweak it a little bit, you know, tweak it somehow. And then I go to my loop here, you know, my MIDI, and I could, you know, I'd see, well, let's just go ahead and do something real quick. E, and then go down to G1, drop it in. Oopsie, look at my MIDI here. And I can go, you know what, I'm gonna drag some of these hi-hat hits to G1 instead, like every other one or something like that, just to create some sort of variation. And on my other hat, I can, you know, I can transpose it, you know, up or down a little bit, you know, roll off the filter a little bit differently, whatever it is, try to create some variation to give it life. You can do that with the kick, the snares. You can even layer some snares. You could turn some stuff around backwards. Probably the easiest way to do that, go up here in arrangement view, just go, you know what, bang, I'm gonna turn this thing around backwards. So let's take a look at the clip, reverse. You know, now you're a little backwards hat. You know, I don't know how that's gonna sound, but I mean, whatever, you know, sounds like a backwards little tiny slice of audio. But, you know, I could throw that into the drum rack as well and have a moment for that where it does something interesting, or I could time stretch something, right? So you could come out here on the arrangement view, take this piece, throw it over here, you know, time stretch it to all heck, and like that could sound interesting. Throw that into the drum rack and you get something like cool too. So there's a whole variety of ways you really spice things up, you know. Right, so that's pretty much it for this time. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a deeper look into some other things next time. We'll get a little bit more advanced on some of this stuff, but you know, that's a lot of stuff right there to mess with some drum loops, to find some inspiration. That's what really these videos are gonna be all about. It's gonna be about finding, you know, how do we get some old life out of this stuff and find some inspiration and do some cool things. So we're gonna keep going on this, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.